Now, it has been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. In the 1980s, thousands of people with the blood disorder haemophilia were given something called Factor VIII, a treatment to help their blood clot. But the blood used in the treatment was contaminated. It had been given by higher risk groups, including prisoners in American and British jails, left many haemophiliacs infected with HIV and the devastating liver disease Hepatitis C. Thousands of people died. Many others have been left seriously ill. David Thomas from Penarth was given Factor VIII when he was just 12 years old. As a result, he was infected with Hepatitis C. He's chosen BBC Radio Wales to tell his story. David, hello, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jason.
And David has got his wife alongside him, Kate, here in the studio.
Hello,
Kate. Morning to you. How are you?
Hello. Good, thank you.
Nice to see you. So, David, let's start at the very beginning. You received the contaminated blood to treat your haemophilia. Tell us about the condition, first of all.
I received contaminated Factor VIII around about 1981, 82, which was infected with the Hepatitis C virus, which sort of unbeknown to myself until probably, I think, 1993, 94, I was informed that I had the virus, referred to as hepatitis non-A, non-B at the time. And informed that it wasn't perhaps the high risk that it's now known to be. And had a liver biopsy in 2009, which indicated I was nearing cirrhosis at that point.
Right, okay. So you have mild haemophilia. The treatment you were given, that inflected blood. Did you need it?
It's a little bit uncertain as to whether it was needed. I had received some Factor VIII in the early 80s for a nosebleed. The nosebleed, which was a persistent nosebleed, was later cauterized, sort of, which indicated that I never needed that particular Factor VIII for that particular incident at all. So it depends very much on which treatment sort of batch it was, but it's deemed that if you were a haemophiliac in the 1980s and received Factor VIII, you were 99% certain to have been infected with either HIV, Hepatitis C, or both.
Were you a well child when you were small?
Yeah, relatively well, relatively fit. I played football, but being haemophiliac, you do have the odd occasion to take a knock. I'm a mild haemophiliac, so my requirement for treatment is probably, at the time, maybe once, twice a year maximum. In more recent times, I probably go 5-6 years without the need for treatment.
Yeah, it's worth you pointing out at this point, you said you had mild haemophilia. What happens to you? What sort of issues can arise when you're a young person with haemophilia?
Joint bleeds and muscle bleeds are probably the most common. So internal bleeding, due to the skeleton and the muscles growing, can put a strain and cause sometimes a bleed. Teeth are probably another issue when your teeth fall out as a kid. So yeah, a variety of things. I'm a mild haemophiliac.
And just to fast forward to your health right now, you've walked into the studio. You look very fit. You look like a very fit man. How old are you now?
I'm 44.
Right, okay.
A couple of days
You're not
ago.
carrying any weight. You're looking fit. You use the gym?
I use the gym. I go to the gym probably 3 times a week.
Right, okay.
So
it doesn't affect your health now?
No, and really speaking, as I say, I played football as a child. It never affected me then, really, either. The more active you are, certainly if you come within the parameters of mild haemophilia, the more active you are, probably the less likely you are to have a bleed.
Kate, I'll talk to you in just a moment about the impact this has had on your family. What about the hepatitis C, though, David? What went through your mind when you were told you had hepatitis C?
When I was told, I was a little bit worried, to say the least. But we didn't really know what hepatitis C was at that moment in time, and the clinicians that were dealing with it through the Haemophilia Society were also a little bit unaware as to just how sort of devastating the impact this disease can have. When I found out 93, 94, of the 4,500 haemophiliacs that had been caught up in this mess, there there probably hadn't been that many deaths. By 2015, I think we're talking about over half of the 4,500 have died. So I think going back to 93, it was less known about. There was less data regarding, you know, what this disease could potentially do to the infected patient. So, as I say, the immediate impact wasn't so much of concern. I was a 23-year-old guy. I had my life to live. I'd just come back from university, graduated, and it didn't affect me too much. It was when in my early 30s I met my wife. We had children. As I said, I had a biopsy in 2009 that really sort of baffled the clinicians that had been dealing with me, because my liver disease was far, far more advanced than the monitoring that they had done prior to that would have indicated.
Yeah. Kate, how many children do you have? Morning, by the way.
Hello. We have 2 young children.
Right, yeah.
At the time of the biopsy, it was a month before our son's first birthday. Our daughter was 3 or 4. So all along we thought that David's health was quite good, that there hadn't been much of an impact on his liver. His ultrasound always appeared normal. He was told, have the biopsy. We think some people have Hep C and they don't have any problems. We think you could be one of them. So he had the biopsy, and then we had the news that, you know, there was quite a lot of damage and he was close to cirrhosis, and it just completely devastated us. At the same time, David's cousin Lee, also a haemophiliac, also infected with Hep C from contaminated blood products, was dying of liver cancer. He was 44. And at the same time, we then found out about David's health. So you can imagine looking at David's cousin and thinking, that's what's going to happen to my husband. I'm going to have to bring up the children on my own. I'm going to lose my husband. So it completely devastated our lives.
Yeah. How old are the children now?
They're 6 and 8.
Right. Do you tell them about
Not
Dad?
at the moment. No, we've not really mentioned it.
Yeah. You don't want to worry them, do you? At that?
No.
They've got a lot to live for and a lot to learn, haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, after the biopsy, we kind of got involved with campaigning to get justice for all of the victims infected with contaminated blood, and they were at an age where they were too young to understand. They're a bit older now, but we still, we're not going to tell them.
Yeah. How did this happen?
It's a little bit sketchy. The Department of Health have been a little bit sketchy in terms of, the documents have allegedly gone missing, been destroyed, with regards to why the sort of chain of custody, if you like, of where this blood actually originated from can't be gleaned. Why we're unable.
They can't trace it back.
There's evidence showing that prisoners, prostitutes, and the like were paid money in these blood factories. There's a famous prison in Arkansas that I think Bill Clinton was involved in his time as the whatever he was there. There's evidence showing that these people were paid, the Skid Row blood donors, as they call them.
Yeah.
And that product is essentially what was pumped into the veins of the haemophiliacs. It was largely a cost-cutting exercise that the NHS went through in the early 80s. There was a product that we had been, as haemophiliacs, administered prior to the treatment via factor VIII, a product called cryoprecipitate, which was derived largely from the domestic blood pool. I think rather than the blood being donated from a pool of potentially 2,000 donors, which you would have in the production of factor VIII, and all you would need in that pool of 2,000 donors was one person to have put 1 milliliter of infected blood in, and it would infect the entire batch of that factor 8 production. Cryoprecipitate, on the other hand, was pooled from about 6 donors, but it was much more laborious for nurses to administer, whereas with factor 8 it might take a nurse 15 minutes to administer. With cryoprecipitate, it would probably take that nurse 30 minutes to administer.
Two things I want to talk to you about. First of all, compensation, and then the overall picture on how you intend to live your life. Have you had any money?
I received via what was the Skipton Fund, or what is the Skipton Fund, a stage 1 payment, which was £20,000, which was made to me back in about 1994. The Skipton Fund then makes you eligible for a further, I think it's £50,000, when your clinician is able to prove to the Skipton Fund that your liver has passed from the fibrosis stage, which is where I'm at, into liver cirrhosis, but only on them saying that you have liver cirrhosis will you get the next payout.
But I'm sure that, David, there probably lots of people listening to your story now, it's a very distressing story, who are saying £20,000, that's not enough. Does the fight go on?
No, the fight has been going on for 30 years and it continues. David Cameron apologised for what had happened in very loose terms at the end of the last Parliament. It was one of his closing sort of comments in the Commons. That we've deemed to be a substantial step forward. It's the first time any sort of leader of the British government in 30 years has admitted any sort of liability for what's happened. But in terms of obtaining proper levels of compensation, the fight will go on until we get that. There's widows. My cousin's wife was left with nothing. I, as a sufferer, have no access to life insurance, no access to mortgage protection.
Nobody will insure you.
Nobody will insure you. No, and therefore that's an added stress in my life, because I know that I have to be alive to provide for
your
my
wife
family.
and your children. Yes, absolutely.
And David's lucky, the fact that he's well enough to work. There are hundreds of haemophiliacs with Hep C that might be in stage 1, so they're considered not to be suffering from so much of liver damage, but they're unable to work, and there's no support for these families.
Do you work, Kate?
I work.
Yeah.
But that's why we continue to campaign for all of those that have been infected, for all of the widows that don't receive anything. Since we've been campaigning, we personally know we've been to 4 funerals of men that have died way before they should have done, that have left families behind.
What sort of ages?
Our friend Mike passed away this year. I think Mike was 48. Had 2 liver transplants due to getting liver cancer from hepatitis C. Had a really good job, was pensioned off because he was too ill to work, and leaves 2 daughters and a wife behind. And
they're left to pick up the pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you? Your overall health?
Yeah, my health is good by comparison with a lot of my peers. As we said, I'm quite fit in terms of, I visit the gym regularly, I eat very well, I don't drink, I don't smoke. So I look after myself. In terms of, the prognosis of having passed into stage 4 of 6 liver fibrosis, which is 75% of the way to liver cirrhosis. I don't really know what that means in real terms. I don't quite understand if I'm now at a point where I've forestalled progression of the disease, or if longer term it will sort of have further negative impacts and make me unable to work. I'm unsure, really.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for coming in and sharing your story. Much appreciated. I hope you'll keep in touch with us and let us know how your fight continues. And we wish you the very best. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you to David Thomas from Penarth and his wife, Kate.